She shouldn't have said it out loud. The words hung in the air like smoke, visible, irrevocable, impossible to take back. Around her, the charity gala continued its performance of elegance. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across marble floors. Waiters moved between clusters of expensive people having expensive conversations. But here, in this corner of the room, the air had stopped moving. "I'm not his." She'd said it to the room, but she'd said it looking at him. Bobby Rocco stood 12 feet away, and no one moved closer to either of them. That was the first thing you noticed about spaces he occupied. People instinctively created distance. Not from fear, exactly. From recognition. From understanding that some gravitational forces don't follow normal rules. He didn't respond. He didn't even acknowledge that she'd spoken. He just tilted his head slightly, the way someone does when they've heard something they already knew, and he stepped forward. One measured step. The sound of his shoe against marble registered before anything else. The deliberate contact of expensive leather meeting floor. No rush, no aggression, just movement that said, "I'm coming closer, and you can leave any time you want to." Adira didn't leave. That was the real problem. Not what she'd said, but what her body did after saying it. He closed the distance by half. "You keep saying that," Bobby said quietly. His voice didn't demand attention, it simply had it. "That you're not mine." "Because I'm not." Her words came out controlled, but her fingers had tightened on the stem of her champagne glass. She wanted him to see that. Wanted him to know she was holding on to something just to stay grounded. He saw it. "If that were true," he continued, moving closer again, another step, unhurried and precise, "you wouldn't have to keep repeating it. That's not logic. That's manipulation." "Look around the room, Adira." She didn't, but she could feel what he meant. The silence. The careful way people had stopped their conversations mid-sentence. The way the energy had shifted into something dangerous and quiet and entirely focused on the space between them. "No one's watching because they think you're right," Bobby said. He was close enough now that she could smell him, cedar and smoke and something darker. "Everyone in this room just watched you say something you don't believe, and they're all wondering when you're going to stop lying." "I'm not lying." "Your heart's racing. Your breathing changed 3 seconds ago. Your left hand is about to crush that glass. But sure, you're not lying." She released the glass before it broke, set it on the nearest surface with deliberate care. When she looked back at him, his dark eyes were patient. Certain. The kind of certain that came from someone who had already won a game she didn't know they were playing. "Stay away from me," she whispered. He smiled. Not wide, just a small recognition at one corner of his mouth. "No," he said simply. And that word, that refusal, that absolute certainty that he wouldn't honor even the smallest boundary she tried to set, that terrified her more than anything. Because part of her didn't want him to honor it. His phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m. Adira lay in her apartment staring at the ceiling, knowing she wouldn't sleep, knowing she'd been waiting for exactly this. The message came through without preamble, without context, without the courtesy of a greeting. "Are you awake?" Not, "Can we talk?" Not, "I'm coming over." Not even, "I can't stop thinking about you." Just, "Are you awake?" The question was a test. He was testing whether she'd lie about being asleep. He was testing whether she'd respond honestly. He was testing whether the woman who'd stood in that gala and said, "I'm not his," would admit to being conscious, to being aware, to being present in a moment that mattered. Her fingers hovered over the phone. She could ignore it, should ignore it. The smart move was silence. She typed, "Yes." One word, no explanation, no defense, just the truth. Within seconds, her phone rang. When she answered, the first thing she heard was breathing, his breathing, steady and controlled, like every other part of him. Like he hadn't been thinking about her for the past 18 hours, like he hadn't memorized the exact shade of green her dress had been. Like he wasn't calling at nearly 3 in the morning because sleep wasn't an option when she was refusing to be his. "It's the middle of the night," she said, though they both knew this wasn't an apology or a complaint. It was observation. It was her trying to establish some kind of normal response to an abnormal situation. "You're awake," Bobby replied. Not a question, a statement of fact. "That doesn't mean you should be calling me." "Why are you awake?" She wanted to lie. Could have easily said work stress, insomnia, bad dream, something safe. Something that preserved the fiction that he wasn't the reason she was lying in the dark, staring at nothing, waiting for exactly this. "Because I can't stop thinking about you," she said instead. The words escaped before she could stop them. Honest, terrifying, complete admission. On the other end of the line, silence. Just the sound of his breathing. And hers. The space between them made audible. "Good," he said finally. "Don't interpret that." "I'm not interpreting it anyway, but the only way it means anything. You're awake because of me. You answered because of me. You're breathing faster right now because I'm on the phone. All of that means the same thing. It means I can't sleep, that's all. You're lying again. I'm protecting myself." "From what?" She sat up, pressed her free hand against her chest, feeling her heart rate spike. "From this. From you. From making another mistake that's going to make it harder to walk away." "You don't want to walk away," Bobby said quietly. "That's not what's keeping you awake." "You don't know what I want." "I know you want me. I know you've wanted me since I walked into that gala. I know you said you weren't mine specifically, so you could hear me say you're wrong. And I know that right now, in the dark, you're imagining what would happen if you stopped fighting." Her breathing hitched. She wanted to hang up. She wanted to throw the phone across the room. She wanted... "Tomorrow," he continued. 7 p.m. 5th Avenue, the restaurant with the private dining room. You know the one. I'm not... But he'd already ended the call. She sat in the silence, phone still pressed to her ear, listening to the dial tone. Her heart was a war drum, her mind was a battlefield, and somewhere deep inside a white flag was beginning to wave. She was already planning what dress to wear. The restaurant smelled like money and secrets. Adira arrived 7 minutes early, not to seem eager, but to maintain some semblance of control. She'd chosen the emerald dress again, the one he'd mentioned at the gala, the one that clung to her body like it understood her better than she understood herself. She told herself it was a power move, that wearing it meant she was choosing to be seen on her own terms. She was lying. The maitre d' escorted her to a private dining room before Bobby arrived. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Fifth Avenue. The city sprawled beneath her like a kingdom. She could see for miles from up here, could see how small everything looked from this height, how manageable, how insignificant. Then she heard his footsteps. He entered without announcement, without apology. The door closed behind him, and the world outside became irrelevant. He wore charcoal gray. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. She could see the beginning of a scar that disappeared beneath expensive fabric, a reminder that underneath the tailored suit there was a man who survived things most people couldn't imagine. "You came," he said. "I almost didn't." "But you did." He moved to the table, didn't pull out a chair for her, didn't perform courtesy. Instead, he sat across from her and ordered without consulting the menu. For both of them, she wanted to protest, to assert her independence. Instead, she watched him. "You look beautiful," Bobby said. "Stop!" "Stop what?" "Looking at me like you've already decided something about me, like you already know the ending." He studied her with the patience of someone who had time and certainty on his side. "I decided something about you the moment you said you weren't mine, because that's exactly when I knew you were. You can't decide things about people. I don't decide. I observe. I see what's actually there, not what you're pretending to be. And what I see is a woman terrified of wanting something she knows will change her." The waiter brought wine. She didn't touch it. He drank from his glass like they hadn't just had a conversation that rewired her nervous system. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Doing what?" "Making me acknowledge things I'm not ready to acknowledge." Bobby leaned back in his chair, completely still, completely present. "You don't have to acknowledge anything. Your silence just did it for you." She wanted to argue, but her throat had closed. Because he was right. She'd come to this restaurant knowing exactly what it meant. She'd worn this dress knowing he'd notice. She'd said yes to his summons knowing she was saying yes to more than dinner. "After tonight," he continued, "you can go back to your apartment. You can tell yourself this was a mistake. You can convince yourself you're still fighting. But we both know the truth, Adira." "What truth?" "That you stopped running the moment you answered that phone at 2:47 a.m. She had no response, because denial required energy she didn't have left. The food arrived. She wasn't hungry, but she ate what he'd chosen for her anyway. And in that small surrender, something shifted. His office occupied the entire floor. Not a building you'd find in public records, not a company with a name on a directory, just a space that existed because he willed it into existence. Security knew her face before she said her name. Elevators opened without being summoned. The world bent around him in ways that seemed impossible until you watched it happen. Adira stepped into the penthouse office and felt the city beneath her feet. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline spread out like a confession. From this height you could see everything, and nothing could see you. "Welcome to my world," Bobby said. He stood at the window, silhouetted against the city lights, not turned toward her, not acknowledging her arrival with anything as common as a greeting. Just waiting. The way he always waited. Like he had infinite patience for the moment when she'd finally stop pretending. "This is different from the restaurant," she said. "Yes." "I shouldn't be here." "But you are." She moved deeper into the space. The office was sparse, minimal, a desk with a single laptop, leather chairs, and on the wall behind his desk, a photograph. Her, from the night of the gala. She hadn't known he was looking, hadn't realized the moment had been captured, but there it was. Proof that his attention had been on her far longer than she'd admitted. "When was this taken?" she asked. "The night you wore that dress and told me you weren't mine." "You've been photographing me?" "I've been remembering you." He turned from the window. "That's different." The violation should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like recognition, like finally being seen clearly, like mattering enough to be remembered with precision. Bobby moved to his desk, spoke about ventures, acquisitions, companies he owned, influence he wielded. As he talked, he walked, circled her slowly, never touching, never stopping, just creating a pattern she couldn't escape without seeming afraid. "I acquire things," he said quietly. "Property, money, power. But the thing I want most has been running from me." "Me?" "You. I'm not an acquisition." "No, you're something more dangerous. Acquisitions stop fighting. You won't stop fighting. That's why I want you." He stopped moving, stood directly behind her, close enough that if she breathed deeply, her back would touch his chest. She chose shallow breaths. "Tell me you don't feel this," Bobby said. "I don't feel..." "Again, like you mean it." She couldn't lie convincingly anymore. That's how he knew. "I can't be with you," she whispered. "It's impossible. You know that." "Why?" "Because of who you are, what you do, because I would lose myself." He leaned closer. His breath ghosted across her temple. "You've already lost yourself. That's why you're awake at night thinking about me. That's why you came here. That's why you're standing in this office instead of running." She turned to face him. His eyes were patient, certain, like he'd already won something she was still pretending to fight. "If I stay," she said, "if I do this, what happens to me?" "You become mine." The room held its breath. And so did she. His penthouse was a cage made of glass and silence. She'd been living there for 3 weeks, and the apartment still didn't feel like home. It felt like a place she was borrowing, like she was playing house inside someone else's life. The closet had clothes he'd bought. The bathroom had products selected specifically for her. The bed had sheets that cost more than her monthly rent used to be. Everything here was his choice. Everything except her. Adira stood at the window, watching the city wake up. Behind her, Bobby slept, or pretended to sleep. She'd learned the difference. When he actually slept, his breathing changed, his jaw relaxed. But most nights he just lay there, perfectly still, perfectly present, perfectly aware of her movements. She turned back to face him. He was watching her, eyes open, dark, patient. "You're thinking about leaving," he said. Not a question. "No." "You are. I can see it. The way you're standing, the way you're not looking at me. You're mentally preparing an exit." She didn't deny it this time. What was the point? He already knew the truth, had probably known before she did. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. Bobby sat up, didn't reach for her, didn't try to comfort her, just waited for her to continue. "I'm scared because 3 weeks ago, I had a life, a job, an identity that was separate from you. And now I'm this. I'm your girlfriend living in your apartment, wearing clothes you buy, attending events for businesses I don't understand. I'm disappearing into you." "Are you unhappy?" "That's not the point. It's the only point that matters." She wanted to scream at him, wanted to tell him that happiness and fulfillment weren't the same thing, that you could be happy and still be losing yourself, that her heart racing when he entered a room didn't mean she wasn't terrified of what that meant. Instead, she said, "My mother called." Bobby's entire body went still. "She knows who you are. She found photographs online. She's telling me to leave. She's telling me I'm making a mistake. She's telling me that you're dangerous and I'm throwing away everything I built." "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. I hung up." He moved toward her slowly, the same measured approach he always used, like giving her time to run, like he wanted her to choose to stay. This time, she didn't move. When he reached her, he took her face in his hands, gently, like she was something precious, like she mattered more than his empire, like her choice to stay was worth more than all the money and power he'd accumulated. "I love you," he said quietly. "I have since that first night. I was going to wait until you admitted it, but I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of silence when it comes to you." She pulled back to look at him. His expression was completely vulnerable, open, real in a way she'd never seen before. "Don't say that," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because if I believe it, I won't be able to leave, and part of me knows I should." "Yes," he said simply. "You should, but you won't." He was right. How many times have you stood at a crossroads and known the right choice, but chosen the other one anyway? How many times have you loved someone you knew would change you forever? Because that's where Adira is right now. She's not leaving, she's not running, she's surrendering completely to something terrifying and real. But here's what most people don't talk about. Surrender doesn't feel weak. It feels like the strongest thing you've ever done. It feels like finally admitting the truth you've been running from. If you've ever been there, if you've ever loved someone so much it scared you, comment below. Tell me about the moment you stopped fighting. Because this story, it's for people like you. People who understand that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is admit what you actually want. And if you want to know what happens next, if you want to see what happens when love collides with his world, subscribe now, because this is just the beginning. The hard part comes next. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. Adira was alone in the penthouse when her office called, or rather, when they called to tell her they'd noticed she'd been absent, when they suggested she take a leave of absence, when they made it clear, in the most polite way possible, that being associated with Bobby Rocco was becoming a liability. Translation: choose him, and you lose everything else. She'd built that career for 7 years, started as an assistant, worked her way up to senior strategist. The job was supposed to be her foundation, her independence, the one thing that was hers and only hers. Now it was leverage. Bobby found her sitting on the kitchen floor, staring at nothing, still holding the phone. He didn't ask what happened. He already knew. People like him always knew when the world was closing in. "I'll walk away," he said. "What?" "If being with me costs you everything else, I'll walk away. I didn't keep you just to watch you lose yourself in a different way." She stared at him, because he meant it. She could see it in his face. The absolute certainty that he would sacrifice his empire, his power, everything he'd built, if it meant she got to keep herself. That broke something in her. "No," she said. "No, you won't walk away because that's not what we do. We don't run from this. Everyone else is running. From you, from us, from what they don't understand. But we don't run." Bobby pulled her up from the floor. "My mother is afraid because she loves me," Adira continued. "But she's also afraid because she can't control this. She can't control you. She can't control me when I'm with you. And that scares her more than anything. But that's her fear, not mine." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He held her like she might disappear, like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. The next morning, she sent the resignation email, effective immediately. No 2 weeks' notice, no explanation, just gone. She didn't have another job lined up, no backup plan, no safety net. Only him. And somehow that felt like enough. Until her phone buzzed. Unknown number, single text. "You made a powerful enemy when you chose him. Don't say I didn't warn you." She didn't show Bobby. Not yet. But the world had just gotten more complicated. And she just realized something terrifying. The person threatening her might not be someone from his world. It might be someone from hers. The late-night visitor arrived without warning. Bobby's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and something shifted in him. The kind of shift that happened when danger entered the room through a text message. He stood, moved to the window, stared at the city like it had just betrayed him. "What is it?" Adira asked. "Someone's pushing boundaries." "What does that mean?" "It means nothing for you to worry about." He left without explanation, without a timeline for return, without the courtesy of letting her know whether she should expect him in an hour or never again. She understood then what it meant to love someone from his world. It meant endless waiting, endless wondering, endless nights where you didn't know if the person you chose was safe or bleeding or already gone. The hours stretched. She tried to sleep, couldn't, tried to work, couldn't focus, tried calling him. His phone went straight to voicemail. She had no way to contact him, no backup number, no location, nothing but silence, and the knowledge that somewhere in the city, he was handling something that required her to not exist. At 3:47 a.m., he arrived. She heard the key in the lock before she saw him. When he walked through the door, she knew immediately something was wrong. His sleeve was torn. There was blood on the cuff. Not much, but enough. "What happened?" she demanded. "It's handled." "That's not what I asked." "It's all you get." She led him to the bathroom without arguing, pulled off his jacket carefully, unbuttoned his shirt. And there it was, a bullet graze across his ribs. Fresh, recent, a reminder that underneath the tailored suits, he was still a man who lived in a world where violence was currency. "You could have died," she whispered. "I didn't." "You could have. And I would have been here waiting, not knowing anything, and you would have been—" "But I'm not dead, Adira. I'm here. I came back." "How many times will you come back with bullets in you? How many times is this acceptable?" "This is my world." "Then I don't want it." "Yes, you do." She wanted to scream at him, wanted to tell him that loving him meant accepting that danger wasn't theoretical. It was proximity. It was real. It was the blood on his sleeve and the scar on his ribs and the understanding that every night he left, he might not return. She cleaned the wound in silence, bandaged it carefully, and in that careful attention, she made a choice. When she finished, Bobby caught her hand. "This is the cost," he said quietly. "Being with me means accepting that my world is violent and unforgiving. It means knowing there are things I can't protect you from and things I won't let you protect me from." She looked at the bandage, at his face, at the man she'd chosen, knowing exactly what that choice meant. "I'm not leaving," she said. "You should." "I'm not leaving," she repeated. And in that moment, loving him stopped being a question. It became a commitment. The shift happened gradually, then all at once. After the night he came home bleeding, Bobby changed. Not dramatically, but noticeably. He checked on her constantly, stationed people outside the building, changed his schedule, started asking where she was going, started wanting to know who she was talking to, started treating her like she was fragile. Or dangerous. She couldn't decide which. "You're different," Adira said one morning. "What do you mean?" "You're worried. You're controlling everything. You're trying to control something you think you can control. Me, because you can't control everything else." He didn't deny it. That's how she knew she was right. "Having you means having a target on your back," Bobby said quietly. "Now people know, and they're going to try." "Then we do something about it." "What do you suggest?" "Let me in. Let me help. Make it known that I'm not a weakness. I'm an asset." "You're not a weapon, Adira." "No, but I'm intelligent, I'm capable, and I'm connected to you. If I'm going to be part of this world, I need to understand it. Not the romantic version, the real version." He wanted to refuse. She could see it in the tension of his jaw, but he was learning something new about her. She wasn't someone who could be protected. She was someone who needed to be included. So he took her to meet his inner circle. 5 men, dangerous men, men who had been with Bobby for years. When he introduced her, he did something revealing. He didn't introduce her as his girlfriend. He said, "This is Adira. She's mine. Treat her that way." The distinction hung in the air. She wasn't a possession. She was his, completely, reciprocally. After dinner, the oldest one, Marcus, scarred and quiet, pulled her aside. "You understand what you're doing?" he asked. "Yes." "You know what he is?" "Yes." "And you're staying?" "I'm not going anywhere." Marcus studied her like she was a problem to be solved. He's been alone his whole life, built an empire so he'd never feel powerless. Then you showed up. Now he feels powerless constantly. That's dangerous. For everyone, especially you. If you leave, people die. Maybe you, maybe him, probably both. The underworld doesn't break up. It implodes. The weight of that statement settled into her bones. She wasn't just choosing him. She was becoming strategic leverage in a world where leverage was measured in blood. When they returned to the penthouse, Bobby pulled her close. "You understand what you've become?" he asked. "What?" "The reason I make every decision, the reason I breathe, the reason I survive." She pulled back to look at him. "And that terrifies you," he continued. "Because if anything happens to me, you're not just losing the man you love. You're losing the foundation of everything you've built here. We're connected now, Adira. Completely, irrevocably." She didn't argue. Because he was right. And worse, she liked it that way. The war started with a phone call. Not an explosion, not a confrontation, just Bobby's phone buzzing at midnight and him listening to something that made his entire body go rigid. When he hung up, he looked at her like she was already gone. "Someone's making a move," he said. "What kind of move?" "The kind that requires us to decide if this is real." She'd spent weeks preparing for this moment without knowing it was coming. Weeks learning how his organization worked. Weeks understanding the intricate web of alliances and threats that kept him alive. Weeks becoming not just his woman, but his strategic partner. "How long?" she asked. "Days, maybe a week." "And what am I supposed to do?" "Stay here, stay safe, let me protect you." "No." "Adira." No, I didn't move into your world to be hidden away while you fight. I married you because I'm part of this, so I'm part of this. The word hung between them. Married. She hadn't said it out loud before, hadn't acknowledged that somewhere in the last few months they'd crossed from lover to wife without ceremony or announcement. It had just happened, the way everything with him happened. Inevitable, unstoppable, irrevocable. Bobby pulled her close. I can't lose you, he said. You won't, because I'm not going anywhere, and because we're going to win this together. She spent the next 72 hours in his office, learning strategy, understanding his network, coordinating with his people. For the first time, she wasn't on the outside looking in. She was inside, completely, dangerously. The rival faction made their move on a Wednesday morning. But Bobby had already anticipated it, had already positioned his people, had already made sure that every move they made was a reaction to something he'd already planned. By Thursday, it was over, not with violence, with leverage, with the understanding that Bobby Rocco didn't need to fight. He just needed to be patient. The rival disappeared. Folded, retreated, wasn't worth the blood. And when it was finished, Bobby found her in his office, staring out at the city. You were right, he said quietly. About what? About being part of this. About us winning together. About being strong enough to stand beside me instead of behind me. She turned to face him. I need to ask you something, he continued, and I need you to answer honestly. What? If you could go back, if you could stand in that gala and know everything you know now, the danger, the blood, the cost, would you still walk toward me? She thought about that moment, about the woman she'd been, about the denial and the running and the careful construction of walls meant to keep him out. Every single time, she said, for the rest of my life, even if it meant all of this. He pulled her close. For the first time since the beginning, there was no tension between them, no contradiction, no unspoken truth waiting to be admitted. Just acceptance. Just choice. Just the absolute certainty that she would do it all again. How many moments in your life have you reached a point where you realized there was no going back, where the choice you made didn't just change your future, it became your future? That's where Adira is right now. She's not just in love with Bobby Rocco, she's become part of his world. She's stood in the fire and chosen to stay. She's accepted that loving him means accepting everything that comes with him, the danger, the darkness, the absolute certainty that her life will never be normal again. And she chose it anyway. But here's the thing about that kind of commitment. It's not the beginning of the story, it's the moment the real story begins. Because now that she's fully his, now that she's accepted what it means to be in his world, everything changes. New threats emerge, old enemies resurface, and the cost of her choice becomes more real than she ever imagined. If you've ever made a choice that completely transformed your life, if you've ever loved someone so much that you were willing to become someone new, comment below. Tell me about that moment. Because this community is built on people who understand that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is say yes to the person you're supposed to say no to. But if you want to know what happens next, if you want to see what unfolds when she's finally fully claimed, you have to subscribe. 3 months later, the city looked smaller from this height. Adira stood at the window of the penthouse, watching the morning light scatter across glass and steel. Behind her, Bobby slept. Actually slept this time. His breathing was deep, his face relaxed. The tension that usually lived in his jaw had finally loosened. She'd learned to recognize the difference between his sleep and his stillness. This was sleep. She turned back to face him. The ring caught the light. Small, elegant, dangerous. When they'd married, quietly in his office with only a lawyer and 2 witnesses, it had felt like the most important moment of her life. Not romantic, practical, strategic, legal. It had also been the most intimate thing they'd ever done. Because this marriage wasn't about love. Love was assumed. This marriage was about commitment, about structure, about saying, I am legally, publicly, irrevocably choosing this. Now everyone knew. She wasn't just Bobby Rocco's woman, she was Bobby Rocco's wife, which meant every threat to him was a threat to her, and every protection he'd offered was non-negotiable. She'd started her own consulting business, legitimate, profitable, legal. She'd become invaluable to his organization not because she was his wife, but because she was brilliant. And he'd become softer, still dangerous, still ruthless, but there was a lightness to him now. Because he wasn't alone anymore. The sun rose higher. He stirred. His eyes opened, found her immediately. Come back to bed, he said. In a minute. She watched him watch her. That patient, certain expression that had drawn her in from the beginning. The look of a man who knew exactly what he wanted and was willing to wait forever to get it. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Regret what? Choosing this. Choosing me. Choosing a life that most people would run from. She moved back to the bed, lay beside him, rested her head on his chest. His heart was steady, consistent, real. I regret every moment I spent running from you, she said. But I don't regret a single moment of surrendering to you. Even knowing what comes with it. Especially knowing what comes with it. He held her like she might disappear, like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. I love you, Adira, he said quietly. I know. Since that first night. I know that too. What took you so long to say yes? She pulled back to look at him. I had to stop saying no first, she said. I had to understand that the strength I thought I'd lose by being with you was actually the strength you were giving me. That surrendering to you didn't mean losing myself. It meant finding myself in someone who saw me completely. He kissed her then. Not desperately, not urgently, just with the certainty of a man kissing the woman he'd chosen and who had chosen him back. When he pulled away, he held her gaze. The threats aren't over, he said. I know. There will be more rivals, more danger, more moments where you have to accept that loving me means living in a world most people can't imagine. I know. But you're staying? I'm not going anywhere. They stood together at the window, looking out at the city. From this height, it all looked small, manageable, beautiful. The dangers hadn't disappeared. They'd just evolved. There would be other rivals, other threats, other moments where she'd have to accept that loving him meant living in a world most people couldn't even imagine. But that wasn't the point of this ending. The point was, she wasn't running anymore. She was standing beside him and choosing him, again and again, every single day. This whole journey, from her first no to her final surrender, it's about recognizing that the strongest moments in our lives aren't when we resist. They're when we stop resisting something real. You might be watching this because you're in your own version of this story. Maybe you're running from something you actually want. Maybe you're protecting yourself so hard you've forgotten there's anything worth being unprotected for. Or maybe you're just fascinated by how someone can deny something so loudly while knowing the entire time that they're lying. Whatever brought you here, if you made it through every moment of this story, then you understand something most people don't. You understand that denial isn't a sign of strength. It's a sign of fear. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit what you actually want. Don't just watch these stories. Live them. Recognize the moments in your own life where you're saying no and meaning yes. And when you're ready to stop running, when you're ready to choose something terrifying and real, come back. Because Mafia Desire Secrets is where we tell the stories of people who fought their own surrender, people who stood in the fire and chose to stay, people like you. Subscribe now, because there are more stories like this coming, stories about obsession, about power, about the moment when denial becomes destiny. And if you're brave enough to face your own truth, you're brave enough for what comes next.